Preserving democracy, building community, and winning elections. That's the signature of all of the groups that we support in Airlift. Tonight, you're going to meet folks from Michigan Liberation who are really in the business of creating democracy for their communities in the process of winning elections. My name is Christopher Lydon. I'm a volunteer with Airlift, and I will be your host this evening. So let me guide you through giving you a sense of agenda for this evening, and then do some housekeeping relative to Zoom meetings and what to expect. So, who was that? So our format is very similar to what we've had in the past, meaning I'll do a kickoff and then turn it over to Danny and our guests, Ray and Nick from Michigan Liberation. About a 30-minute conversation and discussion, followed by 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A. I'll come back at the end of that session and really close out, make an ask for your support. And then at the end of that, we will also have an opportunity, if you want to stay around informally, to have a conversation at the end with both Nick, Ray, as well as Danny. Concerning Zoom, make sure you're muted. Carol Kay is putting up into the chat information relative to along the way. If you have any questions as well, just put it into chat. If there's a problem relative to you getting on or something concerning that, as well as if you have any questions of Danny or Ray and Nicholas, do put them in the chat and we'll get to them as best we can. So with that, I'll turn the meeting over to Danny and begin our conversation.
Thank you, Christopher. My name is Danny Altman. I'm the founder of Airlift, which is a position that you just have to do something once and then you don't have to do anything else. You're always the founder. I want to tell you a little about the relationship between Airlift and Michigan Liberation. But first, I think we should have a few moments of silence and respect for Daunte Wright, another Black man killed by police, who always managed to present themselves as the victims, even though they're alive and Daunte Wright is dead. So I want to take you back to 2018, about mid-year. Airlift, along with our advisors, started looking at the Midwest because the grassroots groups in the Midwest were chronically underfunded in the 2016 election. And there was a growing sense of hope because of some amazing grassroots groups that were getting started and beginning to get funded. And so we began to look at a group called Michigan Liberation, which was an offshoot of a much larger group called Michigan United. And a group of mostly formerly incarcerated people who were at Michigan United decided to go off on their own and start something new. It was considered somewhat of a risky investment, but we decided to go for it, and that was 3 years ago. And in that time, we've raised close to $100,000 for the work of Michigan Liberation. And if you're wondering what that money did, it did a lot of things in the terms that Chris was talking about, preserving democracy and building communities. But if you want to look at winning elections, Michigan was a good place to be in 2020, and Michigan liberation had a lot to do with Biden winning by 154,000 votes, Gary Peters winning his Senate seat by 92,000 votes, Rashida Tlaib winning by 170,000 votes, Haley Stevens and Elisa Slotkin, who are in more difficult districts, holding on to their seats. State Supreme Court flipping to Democratic control. The people that we're going to be talking to tonight can tell us a lot about this work because they had a lot to do with it. First, I want to tell you how we met Nick and Ray, because it's I think it's pretty revealing. The two founders of Michigan Liberation reached a point a few months ago where they decided to move on to other things, and we were on a call with these two leaders, and on this call were Ray and Nick, and we just found it completely fascinating because Nick is the person who develops campaigns, and Ray is the person in Detroit who executes the campaigns. And so we thought it would be really cool to show our donors how the work really happens. And so we asked them to share their story and join us. So I'd like everybody to welcome Nick and Ray, and I thought it would be great to start out if each of you could just give us a little bit of your personal stories, so we can sort of have a sense of how you came to this work. So Nick, you want to kick it off?
Yeah, sure. I can definitely kick it off. Thank you for that warm introduction, and just welcome everybody and thank everyone for taking the time out of your day to come hear from myself and hear from Ray and all the amazing work we've been doing here in Michigan. Again, my name is Nicholas DeFell Buckingham. I use the pronouns he, him, his. I am the campaign director for Michigan Liberation. And as Danny said, one of the founding members. It was four of us that took a leap really off a big stage from an organization, and really wanted to see supplemental changes in our criminal legal system, but not only changes in the legislative and policy. We also wanted the voices of those who are formerly incarcerated and directly impacted to be the ones to take the lead on that. For myself, I am formerly incarcerated. I spent close to a decade incarcerated here in Michigan for a crime that not only changed my life, I know for a fact that it has changed the lives of the survivors of my criminal rage. And going through the prison system, I was sentenced to go into a system for rehabilitation. And while I was spending my time in there, during this decade, there were schools and programs that were snatched away from the system. And what ultimately happened was we were literally just caged. And just having the means of surviving in this system, which just produced more violence in the siege for us, but especially for Black people. I came out 2012. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to go into school. I wanted to be a psychologist. I started a program at Oakland Community College. I learned the hard way that the state of Michigan would never give me a license to practice psychology. I talked to a math teacher, and just sharing my story, this math teacher shared with me that I'm the type of person that is willing to jump in a hole with someone, even if we don't have a way out together. And that's what they call social workers. And so I immediately went into a social work program. I just got accepted into the University of Michigan to complete my master's in social work, which I will be starting later this year. And, I used the education background and a lot of the organizing to not only push my community, but those formerly incarcerated folks. Here in Michigan Liberation, we often say those who are closest to the problem are closest to the solution, but furthest from resources and power. And somebody made a huge mistake by allowing me to get close to resources and power. And so now I'm opening that up to many other formerly incarcerated folks and the people in our communities who are families and supporters of those who are coming out of the prison system. So I can go on and on, but I want to make sure to save some space for my comrade, Ray.
Ray, you're on.
Thank you, Danny, and thank you, Nick. Hello, everyone. My name is Ray Lanier. I go by she and her pronouns. I'm currently the Wayne County Director for Michigan Liberation, and I also hold down our funder and donor engagement. Piggybacking off of Nick, I've had my fair share of stints in and out of the county jail, and was shocked to realize how easy it is to slip into what we call criminality. That what we see on TV as like hardened criminals are really just college students who don't have 30 bucks to change that headlight, and who are too scared to go to court, and how these things snowball and ultimately result in what I refer to as a civic death. Not being able to get college scholarships or loans, not being able to get federal food subsidies, housing subsidies, childcare help. And I ultimately came to a place where I was like, you know what? The system as it stands right now does not deliver any of the things that we were socialized to believe. It does not rehabilitate healthy and whole citizens who are able to contribute to society. It does not create safer communities. And ultimately, like, where's my money being spent? It's being spent to keep and incarcerate people in cages. And safety was never the goal. Safer communities were never the goal. I entered organizing about 7 years ago. I started in immigration, moved into childcare and elder care. As we all know, there's absolutely no plan. And through my work with those two lanes, I realized that they all intersect in the carceral state. And so Nick, myself, and our other two co-founders, Meredith and Alicia, we came together because we realized that nobody was coming to save us. And because we were directly impacted, because we were so close to the problems, and we had a lot to say about what solutions could look like, we formed together to create Michigan Liberation. And we've been developing formerly incarcerated persons to directly change policy that's, affecting Black and Brown communities every day. So Danny, I'll pass it back to you.
Great, thanks, Ray. I wanted to jump into prosecutor races because having progressive prosecutors makes so much difference in terms of like who winds up behind bars and who doesn't. And so and you can decide who wants to take this one, but I'd like people to hear the exciting story about prosecutor races in 2020.
Yeah, I can definitely kick it off. One of my favorite campaigns of all times is the Prosecutor Accountability. And I know a lot of times when I speak of it, the first thing that comes to folks' mind is, how does a formerly incarcerated person get involved with wanting to do work around prosecutors? How does this happen? When we talk about mass incarceration, and we talk about who are the key holders, who are the stakeholders to end the mass incarceration, who are the stakeholders to bringing people home from these cages, who are the stakeholders to changing a lot of the draconic laws that our prosecutors have been operating under for decades, for years. It's our prosecutors and our judges. And here in Wayne County, we have a prosecutor who has been deeply in the game of criminal justice for well over 20 years, coming from the bench of a judge and now being one of the most tough on crime prosecutors in the Midwest. And, when we look at the conditions of Detroit, when we look at the conditions of Wayne County, especially around folks that are either juvenile lifers or people that are spending large amounts of time behind bars. You know, Michigan is one of the few states where we incarcerate the majority of our folks beyond 15 years for crimes that, you know, are well beyond their guidelines of doing that much time. And we started to get out in the community, and this was like 3, maybe 4 years ago, we started to have conversations about the prosecutor. And I can't tell you how many people will approach me and tell me either I'm crazy, I'm out of my mind, I'm a lunatic to go up one of the most powerful prosecutors in the country. We're not going to win, we're going to lose. And it was a lot of that motivated not only myself, but a base of formerly incarcerated folks to want to get out in the streets and start to organize around prosecutors, to start talking about more with our communities of why we fear these people. When we started Michigan Liberation, one of our first projects was getting out on the doors. All right. And this was before, you know, money was coming in. We was hiring folks right out of the county jail, right off of the streets. And we wanted to meet people where they were at. And we focused on 3 counties, Wayne, Oakland, and Kalamazoo. And while we was knocking on the doors, we wanted to ask a very important question around our criminal justice system. Have you been impacted? Do you know anybody that's been incarcerated? How do you feel about your police? What do you know about your prosecutor? Can you name a few judges that's on the bench right now? These are just the little questions that we were asking. And what we got back was like great results. People were really excited to have somebody right there on their doorstep talking about the criminal justice system, talking about prosecutors, talking about judges. But then we learned another side of the story. A lot of our constituents didn't know that prosecutors were elected. They didn't know the power that prosecutors had. They didn't understand the power of our judges, or, you know, even what the judges had power to do. And so for us, we wanted to make sure not only to get a campaign where we can get somebody elected, but we wanted to educate the community and the neighborhoods on what the prosecutors can do. And so we went to work. You know, we launched off what we call a Black Mother's Day bailout. We raised our own money, went into county jail, started to bail out Black moms for Mother's Day, learned so much about the court system and the prosecutors. And it was that started to get folks really involved of how prosecutors can change the way that the system is operating. We organized different groups of folks from exonerees down to juvenile lifers. And these people that were all impacted by prosecutorial misconduct started to build out what are the demands that we want to see? What are the demands that we want to see from our prosecutor's office and from our criminal legal system? And one of the top demands was changing the culture of the prosecutor's office. We had an opportunity to meet Victoria Burton Harris in Wayne County. She is amazing. She listened in on our listening sessions. She talked to many of the folks in the community, plus the organizers. She believed in a platform, a very progressive platform that we were pushing, and she ran on that platform. And, you know, I'm gonna make sure like Ray has the numbers. I'm not really like the number person. I kind of just, you know, get the vision of the campaign out there, and Ray snatches and say, yo, I know how many people we need to go and talk to. But not only in Wayne County did we touch somebody, it happened in Oakland County, it happened in Washtenaw County, and then we started to see it come out in Macomb County. And now we got this idea that, you know, people were waiting for a platform for progressive prosecutors to get some of these movement attorneys and as attorneys for the movement out there to run, to get some of these people in their community that sees the problem and want to connect with the rest of their community to make solutions from prosecutorial misconduct. So let me pause for the cause and I'll toss it over to you, Ray.
So Ray, tell us the Victoria Burton Harris story, because I thought it was really amazing how much she was able to how many votes she was able to get, given it was the first time she was running for prosecutor, and she lost, but the story has a happy ending. So tell us.
Yeah, for sure. So after we launched our 2018 canvassing project, where, you know, we were asking folks what was their first exposure to the criminal legal system, to prosecutors, to courts, to police. We came together in early 2019 and we crafted a vision for a liberated Michigan. It was a platform directly from the community of what they want to actually see safety and accountability look like. We were able to link up with Victoria Burton Harris, who was a movement attorney who was just around, and the community approached her and said, look, we've been watching you for a while. We think that you might be a worthy opponent to Kim Worthy. What do you think? Are you okay with abolitionist principles? Are you okay with prosecuting in a way that does not encourage incarceration? And she said yes. And so we took it to the streets. We talked to as many people as we could. We had everybody organizing. We leveraged the momentum from the uprisings of last summer. And what that ultimately manifested into was us securing roughly 40% of the vote. And while some people may consider that a loss, the organizer in me is like, wow, we have 200,000 people who say that they want a prosecutor who is progressive, one who wants to work in a way that is not going to uphold further incarceration. And even more exciting, Ellie Savitt, who was another person we endorsed in Washtenaw County, another suburb of Metro Detroit, he actually took Victoria Burton Harris as his deputy chief prosecutor. And so now we have this awesome situation in Washtenaw County where it's like a test kitchen of sorts. They've already completely disbanded juvenile lifers. So there are no juvenile lifers remaining in Washtenaw County. They have also stopped seeking cash bail. And they've also decriminalized drugs and sex work in that county. So while these things are very exciting for organizers and for the leaders that we're developing, it's a really powerful story to show that when we organize, we do win. And that just because you like a person, just because a person says that they're going to uphold your platform, it doesn't stop after Election Day. As soon as the next day happens, it's all about accountability. And they've been able to see what it looks like in Wayne with Kim Worthy, who has made several promises, and we're still waiting, versus Washtenaw County, where from day one, they have slowly but steadily been checking off every single box that the community, has demanded of them.
And now, I guess the sense is that Victoria Burton Harris, if she decides to run again in 3.5 years, that she will have the credentials and the experience to get over that line, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And Victoria Burton Harris has already said that she is going to be running in 2024, which is even more exciting. And our base of members is now focused heavily on Kim Worthy. Like I said, holding her to the carpet, making sure that she's accountable. We're still waiting, but our base is sure that she won't see running in 2024 as an attractive option.
Great. So Nick, there's a program that you guys developed called Judge the Judges. And as soon as I heard it, I was excited because it's very clear what it's about in terms of turning the tables. And the idea of having formerly incarcerated people sit down and evaluate the credentials of judges. There's just so much poetic justice in that, and there's so much about it that makes sense because they've lived through the system and they've had to live with the judgments of these people. Can you talk a little bit about how that program was developed and what's exciting about it?
Yeah, for sure. Another campaign we love, Judge the Judges. Literally, it was after voting and walking out of the polls. And for myself, it started with a conversation of who are these people on here and how many folks are going to turn over their ballot and actually mark something for a judge. And so when I walked out of the polls, I started to ask people, did you vote for a judge? And they said, wow, was there judges on there? Which judge did you vote for? And they just said they bubble whatever in, whatever feels comfortable, whatever name felt comfortable for them saying. And so it just dawned on me that a lot of people was missing an opportunity to really get to know who their judges were. We started talking with other folks in the community, different organizations, and just seeing the importance of educating folks through this campaign of Judge the Judges. But then also our Supreme Court was just up for grabs. We were really going to lose power if we did not secure our seats for the Supreme Court in our last election. And with our Supreme Court, there was a jail task force that was developed. There was a person named Bridget McCormick that sat on this task force, and Bridget McCormick is also like the head of the Supreme Court in Michigan, and so built a lot of relationship on this task force. She listened to us. She listened to the formerly incarcerated folks that was coming out of prison. She listened to the juvenile lifers. Not only that, when we were doing the bailout work, she sat there and she listened to us. And not only did she listen to us, but she put a lot of these things directly into action as they were developing and moving out and learning more with the task force. And so for us, again, like how we looked at the prosecutor, wanted to look at the judges race in the same format, wanted to get out in the community and really have fun with this whole judge thing. And, you know, we rented a truck, created a billboard, we put it on the back of the truck. We took some paint, made it look real beautiful. We called it our vote mobile. The original idea was supposed to be an ice cream truck, but we didn't have the funds to get an ice cream truck. So we got a pickup truck, and it was around, so it was nice, right? And we drove this thing all over the place. And on the highway, people was honking their horns. On the side roads, people were rolling down their windows to talk about the judges. Who should they be voting for as judges? Like, not only we're changing the culture of how we vote, but it's so important that we're actually educating people and we're telling them the reasons that this person is really important to our safety, to a state of Michigan, why we need these people in a position of power. So we looked at our Supreme Court, and we also wanted to run a campaign where we were focusing on local judicial races. And so one of the key areas is a city, Harper Woods. There was a young Black woman who died in a Harper Woods jail over the summertime, and it was during the uprisings of George Floyd. And this young woman that died in here, it was like lack of accountability from the police department, lack of accountability from the city officials. And so there was one person that was running for a judicial candidate, and she was the first Black woman to be running for this position. And she looked at our platform. She spoke with many of the folks in our community, you know, many other people that's been directly impacted by the criminal legal system, and has agreed on so many other issues, have agreed on, you know, how we can come together to make solutions in our community. And so, you know, it was a trend, honestly. As many people, I do have my mask. We started making like face masks and started giving them out to folks of judge to judges. We started to have things at the park where we were passing out ice creams to children. And as the children was coming to the truck, they had to bring a parent, and we had talked to their parent about judges. And it amazes me how many people goes into these voting booths not knowing who the folks are, because there's nobody in Michigan that is putting money, that is putting efforts and energy behind our local judicial races, behind our local prosecutor races. But these are very important, powerful folks. So it was good. We feel really great about it. Our wins, we secured the Supreme Court. Out of the 3 judicial candidates that we supported, we was able to get one person in. That was the Rebecca Coleman for Harper Woods. And, you know, we made history. That's the first Black woman to take on that position. And already there's accountability measures that's being held with the police, that's being held with the jail where this young woman has died. And also there is culture changes that is happening at Harper Woods. For years upon years have had history of racism in their city. So we're seeing changes from these campaigns on many levels.
So when I heard about this program, I made some phone calls, and I couldn't find anywhere else in the country where they were doing a Judge the Judges program. It talked to us about Michigan Liberation as a laboratory for developing new and exciting and powerful ideas, and how you look at sharing the things that you've learned and the things that are working with other groups in other states. Ray,
Yeah, for sure. I can take that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're systems oriented in everything. We don't choose races just because they're hot or sexy. There's always a strategic plan behind it. And so with us starting with the prosecutors, it was because prosecutors decide what is considered criminal, what charges are they going to prioritize. We chose the judge's campaign because at the end of the day, when you appeal your case, it's going to end up at the Michigan Supreme Court. And so who do you want there that's going to hold your back, that's going to be holding community values? And so these are the things that we're constantly preaching to our base as we develop them. Our philosophy at Michigan Liberation is that it is our job to organize ourselves out of our positions. If we feel like we're doing too much, it's 100% chance that we are. It is why our agenda, our campaigns are completely developed from the grassroots. We don't like it when our base comes and asks us, what do we need to do next? We're asking them, what do you think we need to do next? And we're here to support. I also often say and joke around hey, my job is just to supply flip charts and pizzas and to answer any questions that you may have. But we're really in the business of deeply training and investing into our leaders, making sure that they know that what an activist is and what the difference between an activist and an organizer is. Letting them know how to write policy, how to have power meetings with these electeds, how do you hold them accountable? And then how do we cross-pollinate, right? Because we don't want to get into the habit of working in silos. It's our belief that, a lot of movement work has been held back because a lot of people aren't willing to share their learnings, where they've messed up, where they've been successful. And so it's really about connecting with other organizers and other organizations, not just across the state of Michigan, but across the entire country. We have regular meetings with organizers from all over a variety of issues, talking about these very things. We're launching a Connecting Families campaign where we're pushing for free telecommunications in all Michigan state prisons and county jails. And we're not doing this in a vacuum. We're in constant communication with organizers from Connecticut to Philadelphia to California, down to Texas, down to Atlanta. When we talk about voter suppression and all of the wins that we had last year and how they're a threat, we're talking to people constantly across the country and bringing our leaders into this space so that, when we encounter a conflict and an oppositional leader will say, well, we have your leader, you guys can go home and sit down. We just laugh at them because there is no one leader. We all know the same thing. We are all trained with the same background. And it's always about moving those who are at the bottom to the top. And like I mentioned earlier with our test kitchen, so to speak, in Washtenaw County, we're constantly lifting up where we are successful and what are the learnings for there so that we can use these as standard model of practices, not just for the county, not just for the state, but for our comrades across the country.
Wow. You kind of ticked off all the boxes. I had a whole bunch of questions, but you managed to touch on a lot of them. In particular, just how you think about training and how you bring people up in the organization. Because if my sense is that if you're not growing, you're dying, and that you have to constantly be looking for new people and moving people up the ladder and giving them a lot of responsibility. And it seems that you've I love the story about when you took some time off over the Christmas break, and you came back, and a lot of your teams had been working over the whole break and presented you with a ton of ideas and things that they wanted to accomplish and messaging that they wanted to get across. That just felt really powerful to me. At this point, I'm going to turn it back to Chris. Chris, have you got some questions from the chat for Ray and Nick?
There's nothing in the chat box right at this point. Maybe it will emerge. I would like to myself hear additional information around the connecting families, and in particular, go behind the screen here and say why. What are the present practices that connecting families is trying to overcome? Because when you spoke about that earlier, it was really an indication of just how bad a situation it is in many incarcerated environments. So maybe share with us what the present practices are and what you're trying to overcome.
Yeah, for sure. Nick, I'll start and then you want to sprinkle in. So yeah, we're targeting telecommunications for a variety of reasons. One, it's a racket. Currently, costs in the state of Michigan are about 4 cents a minute. People are paying astronomical prices, upwards of 10, 20 times that amount to speak to their families. When you look at it at the county jail level, you're incarcerated and you're just trying to let someone know that you've been locked up. It's virtually impossible. When you have an extended stay because you can't afford bail and you're trying to reach out to your attorney, it's virtually impossible. When we look at it at a state level in the prisons, telecommunications has been, monetized to the point where it basically strips everything that reminds a person of their humanity, of why they want to go back home, of what they have to live for on the outside. And it's all for profit. And in my county, Wayne County, we have the Detroit Pistons, and the owner, Tom Gores, actually owns the largest prison telecoms company in the state. It's called Securus. The gag is his top charity, I forget what it's called, but it basically gives toys to children of whose parents are incarcerated. And so it's like, we'll give you this fire truck, but you're not allowed to talk to your dad. We'll give you a Barbie doll, but you can't talk to your mom. And people don't know this. They feel good when they go to Pistons games and they're like, wow, he's doing a great thing, but they aren't talking about the billions of dollars that he's making separating families. And so our goal is to model what's happening in places like New York City, where that's not even an impediment. People are able to reach home, people are able to reach their attorneys, they're able to get out quicker, and they're able to remind themselves of who they are and why they need to get out. I'm going to pause and just pass it over to Nick, who has a lot more to say about it.
Yeah, the connected families is, as Ray said about, the last tinge of hope that a person will have while being incarcerated, locked away in cages. It was connected family. I didn't do this campaign in prison, but 2 years before I came home, I organized on the prison yard in Muskegon to bring the cost of the phone calls down. So it's $25 for 15 minutes, depending on where you were incarcerated. And so somebody like myself that was paying restitution, I was also sued by my attorney. I was only allowed to get $50 in my account at a time. And so that $50, you have to make a very critical decision. Do you want to buy the snacks, the food, your toiletries in order to survive within the prison environments? Or do you want to put some of this money on a phone, which you're probably guaranteed about 2 phone calls, right? And so just speaking with other men on the yard about the cost of the phone calls, everybody was in agreement of this is one tinge of hope when we talk about rehabilitation. To have that personal connection with your family, to have that connection with your children, is the tinge of hope that a person will walk out of the prison system and not be institutionalized. A person that can walk out of the institution and not look forward to going back is that one phone call that a person has. But not only the phone call, what we're seeing right now in Michigan, they have taken away letters. So now people that are incarcerated can no longer receive the physical paper letter from their children who will write, "I love you, Dad," or "I love you, Mom," in a crayon, and you can feel the imprint of that crayon with your finger. You no longer get that. You'll no longer be able to smell the scent of, you know, your mate or your partner of your children that they will often spray onto a letter. They took that away from those that are incarcerated. And when we take away these little small things, they might sound real small to folks, but this is something that's really big, especially around rehabilitation. And when we look at connected families, it's the reason why this campaign is called Connected Families. It's to keep these people connected throughout their time of incarceration. But on the other side of that, it's so much money that is being generated to have a phone system, so much money that's being generated right now for folks to have a virtual visit. They have to pay for these, and there's so many stipulations in order to see a loved one that's been incarcerated, especially during the times of COVID-19, right? We have fought for when we did our campaign around COVID in jails and prisons, we have fought against the county jails and the prison systems to allow the incarcerated population to have at least one free phone call to contact their family about this virus inside of prison. And that was hard. That was a hard demand for our state to meet, but we were able to get that demand. And now it's not much. It's a 5 to 10 minute free phone call. But we know that when we see those little small pebbles that are moving, it gives us the hope that we can continue to move this mountain. If they gave us a 5 to 10 minute free phone call, then we know that we can get free phone calls forever in the state of Michigan, in our county jails, and in our state institutions.
Was there an explanation, a couple questions around what was the justification or explanation around letters, taking away letters? Or was it not even given?
So the justification is the state would claim that it's to control the amount of drugs that is being smuggled into the system. Ironically, during COVID-19, our incarcerated population, both in the county jail and in the state institutions, have not had a single visitor other than those who work inside the prison. In the beginning, when COVID-19 had jumped off and they took away the letters, they raided a prison. They found a lot of drugs in there. Again, there was no visits. And so the one thing that they're leaving out of this narrative is the majority of the contraband that's being smuggled in is coming right from the prison staff. It's coming from our correctional officers. And for some odd reason, it seems like only us who are grassroots organizers and formerly incarcerated people can see this problem, even if they're not getting a single visit right now.
Yeah, and just to add on that, the way that the digital letters work is the mail is sent to the jail, and then those letters are sent to Florida where they're scanned in, and then it's sent back to Michigan. Again, if you trace the money, there's $1 million slush funds behind this. And the slush funds are called crazy things like special operations and weapons fund. Like this is what this money is going towards. And like Nick said, 100% of the contraband that enters into county jails and prisons are smuggled in directly from correctional officers who are charging inmates from their the money that's what's on their books. So again, it always comes down to a racket. It's never about the incarcerated person. Once you're locked in a cage, like they tell you when to wake up, they tell you when to go to sleep, they tell you when to eat, shower, everything is monitored. Anything that's foreign from the outside comes directly from the staff.
So a little shifting question. Some folks are curious about what your budget was, and were there other additional significant funders in addition to Airlift? And share what you're comfortable in sharing relative to that.
Yeah, for sure. So last year, our budget was around, I want to say $2.5 million that we were able to raise. A large chunk of that came from individual contributions. From that alone, I believe we raised about $168,000, with the average donation being at about $39. We had funders from Borealis, We had funders from New American Majority. We had funders basically from all over, especially, and like the Judges campaign, that was like an independent donor from LA who had just heard about our work and was like, hey, I think you guys can pull this off. Are you interested? So we really believe that like, if you build it, they will come. That was literally what the game plan was in 2018 when it was 4 people around a box of pizza and some flip charts in Nick's basement, is that we try to build compelling structure. We try to follow through with what we say, and ultimately the work speaks for itself.
Let me see what else we may have here. Yeah, there's a question about voting relative to, you know, how are prisoners counted relative to districting? You know, are they counted as being part of a district? Are they, you know, just what is that dynamic relative to Michigan?
I love this question, and thank you to whoever asked that. We're actually in the middle of filming a documentary around prison gerrymandering. So as some of you may or may not know, the Michigan State Legislature is held by Republicans who live in rural areas with low actual like citizenry population. But where they're able to win is that those folks who are incarcerated within their districts, they count as constituents. The rub is that those incarcerated persons are not able to vote. Although in Michigan, you can vote if you're in the county jail and you haven't been sentenced. But for folks who are in the Michigan Department of Corrections, they are counted as constituency. And it deals a lot around why it's been so hard to flip our state legislatures. It's unfortunate because over 50% of the Michigan Department of Corrections population comes from my county, Wayne County. And these people are shipped a minimum 9 hours away north to very, very rural areas. So it is a huge dynamic here, not just in our state, but in other states like Wisconsin, other like farming rural states. And it's not talked about a lot, but it's why we see a lot of conservative strongholds. It's because of incarcerated populations, and why it's so incredibly hard to get legislative change around lessening the amount of people that we lock up, because people's seats are literally dependent on bodies that are locked up. Yeah.
I mean, you're describing the intricacies of a system that is so draconian. I mean, you just can't imagine how it was built, but it is built on political power, that's for sure.
Yeah, we had a comment. We were talking to some people that we support in Philadelphia, and there's a new district attorney there, and he's been like taking a lot of people out of the whole process. And so some of the people who are most threatened are not the parole, what do you get before parole then? But it's like the comment that they're all patronage jobs, and their response is, you're taking our bodies away, by which they mean you're taking our livelihood away.
Yeah. Well, let me ask one final question, which is the, you know, how do you measure, and I don't mean in an explicit metric, but how do you measure your work versus in the context of the broader electoral politics within your state or within your county? You know, how does that connection work, and what do you feel you're driving relative to broader, let's say, electoral success in Michigan?
Yeah, that's a really great question. You know, a lot of times you'll see funders or like a lot of energy happen in even numbered years, right? Like the midterms or like the general election. But I'm here to tell y'all it's too late by then. the bulk of the work that allows us to win in those even numbered years occurs in the off years, when we can build base, when we can train people, when they can understand, like, why is our state legislature set up the way that it is? You know, what do people owe you in their elected spot? How do you reach them? How do you talk to these people? Too often we see there's like a ton of money that's dumped, and it's a losing game because you're trying to convince people who are busy working 3 jobs, trying to make $1 out of 15 cents, trying to take care of their autistic kids. You have to be able to organize and politicize them when no one is looking, right? And it's why our model is very heavily focused on local municipal elections. In my region, in my state, we have local yearly municipal elections, and that allows us to have regular practice runs. But what's really special about this concept is that it's these local races that really affect our people's day-to-day hustles, right? You know, lights, gas, water, schools, police. And they're able to learn a deeper understanding of what these things do and what the impact is with a win or a loss. So when we have midterm elections, when we have general elections, you know, that deal with lofty things like the presidency, people have already been in the game. They've been voting every year consistently. They've been holding power meetings with their electeds every year consistently. And they're able to politicize more of their family members, more of the people who work with them, their community members. And basically our expectation in even numbered years is for people to just get information, not because we have to convince them, but because during the off years, we've been telling them that when it's an even year, we need you to snap together. And they do. They do because they understand it and they don't feel like the wool is being pulled over their eyes. They feel power and agency.
Thank you, Ray. That's great. Well, Danny, what time you got?
I think it's close to closing time.
Oh, I don't know about others, but I could, this is like the conversation that we had on the phone 2 weeks ago or so. I could just go on and on and on, but we do need to be also respectful of our audience relative to this evening. So we may need to end this portion. And then if you two can stay around, and others are welcome as well, that after my final note, we will also be around for 10-15 minutes to respond to additional questions and have a little bit more open conversation as well. So Carol, I think it's you. Do you have a slide you're going to share? There it is. So I couldn't have said it any better than Ray, right? The off year is the time that the work is done. This is an off-year election. And after all of our exhaustion going into a general election last year, and incredible generosity, both of time and money on everyone in this call, the realization is this is the year to really support groups like Michigan Liberation. This is the time to step up, all of us. So a couple things I'd like to highlight here. One, if you have any questions at all relative to either Airlift, how you can help, how you can volunteer, provide information, or perhaps even get additional information about Michigan Liberation, just ask. You know, just send us an email relative to info@airlift.fund, and one of us, Danny, myself, Carol, others, will respond to you with the information or point you in the right direction. Part of this info is also spread the word yourself of whatever you heard this evening. If nothing else, spread the word to friends and family around both Airlift, but also the realization that now is the time to really be engaged. There are a lot of ways for you to give. So really have expanded the capability relative to giving. You can go online. You can make a check out directly to Airlift. If tax deductible issues are ones that you want to navigate, then we have someone in place, and just ask us those questions and we'll be able to respond to you. And if nothing else, you could put in chat what your pledge is, and we'll be glad to follow up and give you a call very quickly. But there are lots of different ways to donate money and also time and resources. And I encourage you to, I know you're all involved to begin with, and I encourage you to continue that involvement and just ratchet it up as best you can.